All right, everyone. Thank you for joining this one. We're on class 2 for NextGen Advanced. So last class, we were talking about finding the right line through the corner. So usually involved something like entering on the high side, having at least one apex on the bottom, maybe a double apex, following a smooth line through the corner, tracking out right up towards the wall, and all those points should be attached with a really nice, smooth circular arc through the corner. Also talked a bit about our settings and stuff, so making sure our force feedback is half decent. Stuff like our monitor settings, that sort of thing, sound settings. Make sure we're all good on that stuff. I gotta start streaming my screen, is what I'm missing. There you guys go. All right. And also, if anyone's not in the session already, the hosted passwords in the chat there, you're welcome to join in and do some laps if you'd like. Otherwise, you can just watch the stream and listen to me talk if you'd like. All right, so this one, we're building on from that, finding the right line through the corner. And we're also going to talk about tire limits and being on the tire limit, what that means, what that feels like, what that means in terms of car balance, whether you're tight or loose, that sort of a thing. So actually, a few of you have already talked about with this, so I'm sure some of you have a good understanding of the way I think about this. But does anyone want to take a shot at it? What do I mean by the tire limit? What does that mean to you?
I think, I guess to put it shortly, is kind of maximizing the grip or the optimal slip angle of the tire.
Yep. So absolutely, you definitely want to maximize the grip of the tire. And the reason for that, we're trying to go through the corner as quick as we can. So ideally, you want to be on the absolute limit of that tire, using all of the available grip of the tire all the way through the corner in order to get through the corner as quick as possible. So that honestly is the simple recipe to going fast. It's not the easiest thing in the world to do. So we'll start with front tire limit. So first of all, with the front tire limit, so that's how much grip the front tire has. You want to be at that peak limit. And if you are at that limit and not at the limit of the rears at all, so let's say your rears have lots of grip available with them and you're already at the limit of the front tires when you're going through the corner. What does that feel like to you? Should that be tight or loose?
Like,
Yep. So going through the corner, front tires don't have any more grip to give. Rear tires have a bunch more grip available. You're going to feel like, oh, if I turn the wheel any more than this, I'm going to start sliding my front tires, right? And then, of course, the opposite's true. If you're going through the corner and you're at the limit of the rear tire's grip, doesn't have any more to give you. If the front has plenty of grip and you turn the wheel a little bit more, well, the front's going to grip up, but you're already past that rear tire limit. You're going to feel loose. You're going to get sideways. All right. Now let me ask you guys, did anybody watch the recording for beginner class 2? Because you're going to be cheating a little bit if so.
Yes, I did.
yeah.
Yeah, I figured somebody would. That's okay. Don't worry. We can go into deeper detail on that, but I do want to make sure everyone's caught up here. So there's going to be a little bit of repetition. Um, so how do you guys feel the front tire limit? So if you want to get to that absolute limit of grip in the front tires, what do you guys look for? What do you guys feel for? What does that usually mean to you?
For me, it's feeling the maximum output of force feedback. There's like a little peak in it, and once I hit to that point, that kind of tells me where the maximum grip level is, and to not turn past that point.
Yep, absolutely. You're cheating again, Zach. I told you that already.
Yeah, you did. But that, I mean, to answer your question, that's
Yeah, no, you're totally right. All right, so I'm posting a picture in NextGen Advanced 2. I put this in the beginner class as well. But let me explain this picture. So you guys should all be able to go over and actually, you know what? Instead of that, how about I just switch my screen on OBS? So anyone watching the stream should be able to see this. There we go. All right, you guys see this graph?
Yep.
All right, so this is a graph of slip angle. This is what iRacing uses in their tire model. You know, not literally this graph, but this is the data they use for making a tire model. And basically, it's how much the tire is sliding relative to the direction of travel. Basically, how much you're steering the wheel. If it's the front tires, it's how much you're turning when you're going through the corner. And the vertical axis here, or like how high up the graph goes, this is how much grip the tire is giving you. So the tires give you a force to turn the car, and the more you turn the wheel, the more force you get, up to a point. And if you keep turning more and more and more and more, you're going to start slipping your tires. You're going to feel like you slide up the racetrack even though you're turning the wheel even more and more. You might even start smoking the tires if you really start turning the wheel a lot. You'll see smoke coming behind the car. And this is not something that you want to do. It's turning way past there. So you'll see that there is a peak in this graph, and on this particular graph, it's about the 6 degree mark, I would say. So whenever the tire is 6 degrees sideways relative to the direction of travel, that is the maximum grip the tire has for you. And the cool thing about this graph and the cool thing about tire grip is, at least with the front tires, this is also force feedback. That's what Zachary here was talking about when he said that's what he's trying to feel for. He's trying to feel the peak of force feedback. That's because the peak of force feedback is also the peak of tire grip. It's right here. So if you drive through the corner and you kind of wiggle your wheel around and you try to hone in on whatever's giving you that most force feedback, that is going to be the tire limit on the front tires. It's not the easiest thing in the world to feel because you see it kind of flattens out, even though like right at this peak, if you go a little bit to the left and a little bit to the right, that's not very much of a difference, right? So it's hard to feel. It's very subtle, but it's there. And especially if you start wiggling the wheel back and forth, you should be able to hone in on that very peak. Now, here's the issue that a lot of iRacers have, and I was guilty of this when I first started, and actually in the first year or two, I was guilty of it. Um, Instead of living in this range right at that peak, I spent most of my time driving around here. And the reason for that is because a lot of people they don't have the feel for this built up. They don't really use the force feedback to try to figure out where that absolute best point in turning is. What they use is they keep turning until it stops turning anymore, right? So they turn the wheel they keep turning and turning and turning, and they carry as much speed as they can through the corner, and then they turn the wheel a little bit more, and then they start feeling, oh, if I start turning the wheel more, I'm sliding up the track. But if they're already at that point, they're kind of hanging around this point a lot. And that's what most people do. Most people turn the wheel. This ends up being about 10 to 20 degrees on the steering angle. Most people turn just a little bit more than they need to be. A little side tangent, by the way. Uh, this is 6 degrees, and there's 7 degrees, and there's 8 degrees. I'm saying most people hang around the 8 degree mark here. I actually know that for a fact. It's like 1 to 2 degrees more slip angle than they should be, because I see people turning about 20 degrees too much. And if you take the steering ratio of 10 to 1 or 12 to 1, which is what a lot of people use in the trucks and the old cup car, if you multiply 12 times, or if you divide your excess steering angle of 20 degrees, divide it by 12, you'll end up with like 1.6 degrees of slip angle extra, or whatever that is. So that's why I'm saying it's about here, because it actually is where most people end up, based off of my coaching experience. Zach, you've been volunteering your knowledge. Do you agree? Is this Is this what a lot of people tend to do, at least in your experience?
Yeah, and in my own personal experience as well.
Yep.
It's a tough thing to feel, like the exact point.
Yeah, but I don't mean to, go into your personal experience too much there, Zach, but we worked together a little bit and you've improved a lot just backing up your steering to around this peak instead of going past it at any point, right?
Yeah, absolutely, it's a game changer.
Yeah. So the other really nice side effect of this is if you're not passing that peak slip angle, um, you're also not overheating your tires and wearing your tires excessively. So tire heat, tire wear is all a byproduct of turning the wheel too much past that slip angle peak. So very, very important to focus on that. That's something we're going to spend a bit of time on trying to hone in on. So I'll get you guys to drive around a little bit if you'd like. Anyone that's in the session here and is willing. I'm just going to show you quickly what I want you to work on here. So on the stream here, I'm going to turn on my steering wheel. May as well move my camera down a little bit too. How do I do that? Driver height? I think that's here somewhere. Yeah. Yeah. All right, so I'm just gonna drive around. I'll do a couple of laps here. I got my all-time best lap, this is the best lap in my session as a reference. And I just want to show you how you can do the same laps or similar lap times doing quite different steering wheel inputs. So the first one, I'm gonna intentionally underdrive just a little bit. I'm gonna turn the wheel a little bit less than I really need to. And just try to get a feel for where my hand ends up. My right driver hand. There it is, maybe it's covering up just to the right of the RPM gauge. And my tires really aren't warmed up, so I'm gonna do a second lap here. Also without talking and driving a little bit. Alright, let's go for that faster lap. Alright, not a bad lap. Hit a low flat. I'm also going to drive like this now. My hand's clearly quite far to the left. Get into the corner. There we go. So I'm kind of just holding my wheel straight. This was much slower. So even though my line was pretty much the same, I'm following that circular arc I was talking about. So what are you going to do? Are you going to memorize exactly where to put your hand? Of course not. That's not the way to do it. We're going to look for that peak force feedback strength. But the issue here is if you just hold your wheel straight like this, you're never really going to feel for that. So especially when you're sort of learning, what you want to do, I'll tell you how I do it first of all. I'm feeling for that peak force feedback strength on my entry. So I'm slowly building up my wheel. I get into the corner and I feel for that peak strength and I end up finding that peak amount of grip, and it was right there. But this is what I want you guys to try, especially if you don't have a really good feel built up. I know Zach, yours is a bit more developed now because you've been practicing this already. But instead of driving like this with a perfectly smooth wheel, just try moving the wheel around a little bit like this. And you'll hone in on that peak, and I feel it right there. It's right there. That's the most amount of force feedback. You can do this if you want, but that's probably a little excessive. And there's one other thing I want you guys to try. I'll give you a reminder on this. We'll do it at the end. But I want you to try, and just to prove to yourself that turning too much does actually reduce your force feedback, just try doing this. And you'll feel the wheel goes completely light, especially when you wiggle it back and forth to really feel for that force feedback. So if you turn crap out of your steering wheel and you wiggle the wheel back and forth, this feels like half the force feedback And you can see it on the top right there on my F bar on the top right of my screen right here. You know, if I turn the wheel normally, I fill up about a third, and if I turn even beyond that, it's like a quarter. You lose a lot of force feedback. All right, so anyone have any questions about that before we I'll try it out? I hope that's all pretty clear. No questions. So you guys want to get on track and do a few laps? Try to feel it out, see if you can see if you can feel it. Of course, you need to have force feedback on for this and a decent strength. So make sure you're comfortable with that too.
Hey Keegan, could I ask, do you use usually one steering pinion for each track, or does it vary by track?
I've been using the 315 all year in the Coke series, but I'm actually switching to the 236 this week just to see how that works. The reason for that is because this car doesn't really have the best force feedback feeling, and I felt like I wasn't feeling that peak slip angle very well. So I want to have a bigger range of motion, so I'm able to wiggle the wheel a little bit more to give myself a better feel. So I'm actually trying 236 this week. But that's a good thing to bring up is you should be able to run any steering pinion and turn the same lap times and have the same tire wear. There's a lot of misconceptions going around that a higher ratio or a lower steering pinion will help you save tires. But the reason for that is because people that turn the wheel too much already, it's going to be a bit of a crutch for them to just run a higher steering ratio because it'll naturally force them to turn the wheel a little bit less in the corner. So that's why it works for a lot of people, but it's not necessary. As long as you build up a good feel and you start feeling for that force feedback, that'll help a lot.
So I have a question about the wiggle. Um, do you do that basically in practice, or do you do it over like the whole race, just constantly doing that?
So what I do when the car's tight is I usually feel for that on entry. I might do a few little wiggles. Here, I'll play it. I'm gonna play my hot lap, okay? Uh, on my stream here, if you want to have a look. So here's my fastest lap, and you can see how I move my wheel around a little bit on the entry, right? See how I'm moving the wheel just a little bit. That's all I'm doing for wiggles, and that's just me trying to feel the grip in the tires. Remember that peak slip angle, it's very broad. So you can actually, like, 1 to 2 degrees either direction isn't going to matter too much with your steering angle. But you can see on the entry, I'm feeling for that front tire grip. I'm doing a little bit of wiggling. And then right there, I feel it. That's nice. That's why a little bit of extra force feedback, like if your force feedback kind of moves your wheel around a little bit, that's good. Like it helps you. It shouldn't be ripping it out of your hands or anything like that. Anyways, anyone doing some driving? You wanna feel that yourself, or you wanna move on to? We can move on to the next one too if you want. Only Zach's taking me up so far. So even if you don't want to do any practice right now, I really encourage you to just go on track and turn the wheel like 180 degrees and then start doing that wiggling, and you'll hardly feel anything compared to doing the wiggling at speed. Make sure you're up to speed, Zach. You're not going to feel anything if you're not going at full speed.
Can I ask you to clear a black?
Yeah, of course. But to also answer your question about the wiggling, like I wouldn't do a large amount in the race for a tight car. I would do a bit for a loose car. We're going to get to that. But it's good to just do it as a bit of a drill to when you're trying to learn to find that peak slip angle. And it's especially important if you notice like you're burning your right front tire off compared to the fastest guys, like somehow they're going faster than you and their tires are better. It's almost certainly because you're turning past that peak slip angle at certain points through the run.
Is there, or would you know, like, what the closest steering ratio would be to running 2.36? Like, would it be closer to 14 or 16 or 12?
I think it's like 12, maybe
Okay.
14. The 315 is kind of close to 8, 8 to 1. All right, so I've been watching you, Zach. If you want now, maybe go full speed into 1 and 2 here, or get up to speed for 3 and 4 now.
Yeah,
And
sorry, I was turning the force feedback down.
yeah, no problem. Maybe try turning the wheel like 180 degrees and just do some wiggles the same as what you're doing now. Turn the wheel all the way. It's not going to turn down on the apron if you don't have any front grip. And then do your wiggling and it's going to feel like it's dead, right? It's
Yep.
not giving you that same peak in the middle anymore because there isn't one. It's just flat. I'm on board with you now, David. You want to try doing some wiggling next time through the corner and try to hone in on that. Can you feel like that gives you a lot better sense of where you are with your tires when you're wiggling back and forth?
Yeah, absolutely.
Of course, you want to minimize it like we were talking about when you're actually racing. But
And I'm definitely, that's really helped me learn. I'm definitely turning in way too hard, like always. So,
yeah, all right, awesome. Yeah, looks like you're pretty close to where you should be there based off of what I'm looking at. You want to try now, David, turn the wheel a whole bunch in this corner? So once you get in there, now just crank the wheel completely sideways, even more, and now start wiggling around. Yeah.
yeah, it's like dead, nothing.
Yep, exactly. So that's how you know if you're at the peak, is if your maximum force feedback feeling is in that middle somewhere. That's when you can hone in on it really nicely. But if it's way down past the peak, or if it's way under the peak, you're not going to feel it. All right, anyone have any questions about that? I'll let you guys work on this on your own time too if you'd like, but we can move on to doing this same sort of thing but for a loose car if you guys would like. Actually, there's a couple of other points with a tight car I should bring up first. So we talked a whole lot about force feedback and feeling it in the wheel, right? Are there any other ways you guys feel for a tight car? So I'll give you one. So sound is really useful. I think we talked about this in the last class, but if you go to the options and you go to the sound settings, you can turn your tires all the way up and the engine should be down a little bit, and just gives you another extra sense. You can hear the screeching of the tires, and it just gives you another little input that might help you learn where that tire limit is.
This, I think I have another one, which it was going to be kind of a question I asked too, is if I can't feel the rear tires on exit, it almost tells me like it's too tight as well. Like if I don't feel like I'm using them all the way, I don't know if that makes sense, but and I
Yep.
don't know if that's even sound logic.
Yeah. Well, okay. So we'll get to the rear tires in a minute too.
Okay.
And not to dismiss your question. I'm just saying like we will cover that. But either you're not on the rears, you're not using the rear tires on exit as well as you could be there, uh, but you could be also not using the fronts. You might be just going too slow or going too straight up the track, right? Um, you might be tight, you might not be tight. Not sure.
Could it be a setup thing as well, or do you feel like you're always on the rear tire, or you can always kind of feel the rear tire limit, regardless if the car's tight or loose?
This setup, if you guys are all on the fixed setup like I am here, like this setup's absolutely plowing. I'm not using the rears on the exit at all. It's all on the fronts, at least in the first few laps. Um, but when I'm driving a tight setup, I do my best to get on that rear tire limit as much as I can, because you want to heat those rears up, not use the fronts as much. We'll talk about that in later classes. Yeah, it's really it's an art to drive a tight setup loose and to drive a loose setup tight. Uh, yeah, definitely a big point to talk about for sure. All right, the other one. So we talk about turning the wheel more and not feeling any more force feedback, but there's another one. So remember, we're trying to follow that smooth, consistent line through the corner that we talked about, right? Well, what happens if you're following a line and then you turn the wheel more and then you start deviating to the right of your line? Well, sounds like you just went past the tire limit and you started sliding your tires, right? So that's why you can tie together that what we were talking about last class about following a smooth arc through the corner, trying to follow a smooth trajectory without any deviations. Um, if you start turning the wheel and then you're not following the line you expected to, like if you turn left and the car doesn't go left, well, you're past the tire limit, right? Like a lot of people don't get that. If you're already feeling tight and you need to come down the track and you're not going to hit your second apex like you expected to or something like that, and you just turn the wheel a little bit more trying to get it to turn and it doesn't do it, you need to back that up and turn it back to the right a little bit because you're already past that peak. Now, on the same side, if you turn the wheel a little bit and it does turn for you, well, you've just built up to that peak a little bit. So that's a way of telling you visually whether or not you're on the tire limit is if the car visually starts turning more, you're building up to that limit. If you turn more and if you turn the wheel more and it doesn't turn the car anymore, you still keep following that same path, you're past that limit. So that's just as important as the force feedback, I believe, but it's a little bit easier to understand, I think, and a lot of people use that already, but it's not as easy to see, I would say, or feel. Does that make sense? You guys are here, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, it makes
Yep.
sense.
Okay.
yeah, it makes sense.
All right, let's move on to loose. So just a second, got to not leak my setups. All right, I'm gonna share you guys the loose setup. All right, I am going to do a couple of laps on this first, and then I invite you guys to try it as well. So this is the fixed setup with, about 15% less cross weight and way less nose weight and all that stuff. It's extraordinarily loose, like way looser than any fixed setup you'll ever have. But I just want to take it to the extreme because I think this first setup was already pretty tight. So we may as well isolate the loose case. How do you feel the rear tire limit? How do you visually see the rear tire limit? And how do you build up to that? So, all right, let me do another couple of laps here. I'm gonna wreck the first couple of times probably, but I just want to get a lap down for you guys. I did this for the beginner class, so you guys probably saw it already. But I had a 29.3 or 23.3 or whatever it was, a point 3.
Was that the setup that you had in the shared setups in the last class?
No.
Because that one was really loose.
Maybe it was. Oh, yeah, I sent it to you guys, yeah.
Yeah, I thought oh, there you go.
That's because I was listening to you. Okay, you can finish your question now because I have time.
Well, I was gonna say, I loaded that one up the first thing instead of the Dover fixed, and I thought, oh my God, I'm horrible at driving.
Yep. Sorry, I didn't let you guys know that. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and do that lap. I'm gonna take it cautious the first one. Maybe I'll do another lap after that. But this one's gonna be extremely loose. We're gonna be on that rear tire limit at all times. Trying to use the fronts whenever possible, but it's gonna be a rarity. Alright, let's do next lap. Obviously very hard to drive. We'll have a look at the first one. Actually, sorry guys, I don't mean to take up too much of this time, but I should try to lay down a half decent lap so we can use that as a reference. So you'll notice I'm doing a lot of wheel movement, and all those wheel movements are designed to, instead of staying on the front tire limit, I'm trying to stay on the rear tire limit. And it looks like I'm a supercomputer because I'm making all these crazy quick movements, but it's actually a lot more simple than it looks. So trying to follow a smooth arc through the corner, trying to stay on the tire limit as consistently as I can. Those are my two ingredients that we've built up so far. Haven't talked about throttle or brake technique yet. That's class 3. Or even some of the steering wheel stuff. But we'll get there. Alright, I managed a 0.29. Okay, so again, ridiculously loose setup. So we're almost never on the front tire limit here. You'll notice, just for example here, what's this? I think I even changed the steering offset on this one, but even then, this is the tight setup. This is how much I'm turning. I guess my end of my thumb starting to get onto the dash or finger. So that's about where I'm turning to. And then if you look at my fastest lap here with the loose setup, I'm only getting to about here at a maximum, looks like. So what do you guys think happens if I turn that extra few degrees? If I turn to here?
It's coming around.
Yep. So at this moment, I'm on the rear tire limit. I'm loose. So I'm at the rear tire limit, and I'm not at the front tire limit. The front tire limit is around here with my finger. If I turn the wheel a little bit more, like whatever that is, for 10 degrees or something more, there's more grip in the front tires. I'm not at that peak in the front slip angle. I'm at the peak in the rear. And if I turn any further, I'm going to get to the peak in the front. I'm going to get more front grip. It's going to demand more out of the rear tires, and it's going to go past that peak slip angle limit in the rears, and I'm going to spin out. All right, so why all the crazy wheel movement? Obviously to stop the car from looping, but anyone have a more elegant way of putting it?
To keep it under the limit.
Keep the rear tires under the limit, right?
Right, that's what I mean.
Yep,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yep, definitely right, Aaron. All right. So this all looks crazy and looks like it's hard to decipher what's going on here, but I hope in a few minutes we'll be able to figure it out a little bit more clearly. So, first of all, how do you guys feel for the rear tire limit? So we'll start with force feedback. So remember with the front, we're trying to feel for that peak in force feedback, maybe by wiggling the wheel a little bit to try to build up to it. That's what we want to get to. So how about for force feedback in the rear? Um, what do you guys feel for with that? So directly, you're not actually going to feel anything. But what do you guys think happens just at the moment right here? Or where did I get loose? Right around here. Yeah, right there. What do you guys think I felt in my force feedback right before I made that correction?
It pushes the wheel back to the right.
Yeah, it's kind of naturally making the wheel go to the right. It's like a centering force, I guess, sort of. It feels like the car. It's kind of hard to. It's hard to explain it even. It feels like the force feedback loosens up, but it's naturally righting it towards the right, I guess. Um, so what's going on there is the rear's stepping out sideways. So all of a sudden, instead of my slip angle being to the left and all, like being at the close to the peak slip angle, all of a sudden the car gets sideways, and now there's a bit more slip angle on the front tires. So you're gonna have more torque trying to center the wheel. That was a shaky explanation, I'm sorry. Let me try it again. So we're a little bit under the slip angle peak. So we have a little bit less than peak slip angle. And then when the car gets a little bit sideways and we're still steering the wheel the same amount, now we have a bit more slip angle on the front tires. So you're going to feel a little bit more force feedback trying to straighten the wheel out. So coupling that with knowing I'm about to spin out, it's kind of forcing the wheel back to the right, and I let it go back to the right.
It puts a clockwise force on the wheel.
Yeah, yep, exactly. A little bit more than what we had before.
Right.
So you should be able to pick up on that a little bit more force feedback just at that moment, and it's trying to center the wheel on you. And if you know that, oh, I shouldn't be on the front tire limit, I'm getting loose here, I better do a little correction. All right, so that's force feedback. It's easier to feel it than it is to explain it, I would say. But I think an easier one to see and also feel in quotation marks is the visual. So what do you guys think you see? What's the visual cue that you're getting loose?
The car's sliding sideways. They're turning sideways.
Yep, exactly. So for example, like if you look at your upright here on the windshield, all of a sudden my car gets sideways and it approaches the apron. Right, so clearly my whole car is pitching to the left. That's also why I really suggest to have your rotate with velocity at 0%, because otherwise it would mess that sense up. You don't want your camera to turn its direction when you're getting sideways. You want that to be your eyes job because that gives your brain the cue that you're getting sideways. So that is how much sideways you are, which a better word of calling that is your yaw, or the angle of yaw through the corner. And this is what that looks like. Right there. You can kind of see it. The back end stepped out a little bit in the chase view, right? Here, I'll play it in full speed if anyone's watching the stream here. So the rear steps out a little bit, and then I correct it. All good. All right. Now here's the key, and then anyone that was watching the beginner thing already knows this punchline too, but the amount of yaw angle that you're carrying into the corner, whatever this is this 5 degrees? I would say it's 5 degrees. Whatever that is, that's exactly what your rear slip angle is. Except for toes or rear steer or any of that stuff. Like, ignore that for a second. Um, whatever your yaw angle is into the corner, because your rear tires don't steer except for toe, um, that is exactly what your rear tire slip angle is. And guess what? Your rear tires have the same slip angle curve as your front tires do. So you want to be at that same, I don't think it's 6 degrees. It's more like 3 to 4 degrees in NASCAR. You want to be at that same slip angle peak to get the most grip out of the rear tires. So just like you're driving on dirt, you want to be 20 degrees sideways at dirt or 30 degrees or whatever to get the most bite out of the car. On asphalt, you want more like 3 to 4 degrees. So it's the same thing. If you're 0 degrees sideways, you're not making any grip out of the rear tires. You can go consult that slip angle graph again if you want. But every extra degree of sideways you get, the more grip you're making out of those rear tires and the more it's helping you turn. So unfortunately for people that don't like driving a loose car, you need to use the rears just as much as you use the fronts in order to get through the corner fast. And you are doing it without noticing to an extent, probably. But if you're half a tenth off and you don't know why, or if you're a tenth off and you don't know why, it might be partially because you're abusing the front tires or going past that slip angle curve. But it very well might be, and also likely, you're not using the rear tires as consistently as you possibly can be. So this is what you want to see visually, and you want to get a sense of it out your windshield as well. But if you watch the chase view, when you go through the corner, you want to be able to see a little bit of your door on the entry to the corner. See how that kind of comes into focus here. When we're going down the straightaway, there's no slip angle at all here, so I can't see the door because there's no yaw. But when we go into the corner, we start to see my door. It gets kicked out a little bit sideways, and I'm doing everything I can to maintain that 3 or 4 degrees. Sometimes it kicks sideways a bit, and I have to correct it again. But same thing through 3 and 4 here. Gonna go into the corner. It's gonna kick a little bit sideways. Let's say 3 to 4 degrees probably. By the way, this is a telemetry channel on VRS if anybody's interested. It's under the advanced telemetry section. You can go to car balance and it's tire slip, rear tire slip, I think, and it'll tell you how many degrees sideways your car is. It's really nice. But even though I have a ridiculous amount of wheel movement, I'm really maintaining a pretty nice yaw angle, aren't I? Not trying to toot my own horn, but yeah, that's what I'm doing. That's what I'm going for. So play it full speed, except for that really big correction I had on the exit of 2 here, right there. For the most part, I was maintaining a very consistent sideways angle. Do you guys all see that in the replay? And
Yeah.
has anybody
Yep.
looked for that before?
No.
All right, well, it's very, very useful, Aaron. So even for like with the trucks and the Xfinity car, you kind of drive those cars a lot more sideways, so you'll notice it more with those ones. But what you want to do is you want to look at your door through the corner, and you want to see it present itself the same amount, kind of like what I'm showing here. It's even more obvious on the truck and the Xfinity car. But yeah, really useful to look for. Zach, we've talked about this before, haven't we?
Yes, we have.
So again, just to wrap this up and to make that really clear, the sideways angle we're looking at here and how much of the door you can see, it's directly related to how much of the rear tires you're using. Because the angle you see on the door is the same as your yaw angle, which is the same as the slip angle on the rear tires, which equates to getting close to that rear tire limit. And ideal, like if you put a supercomputer, like in 50 years, if they can make a computer that's better at driving a car than we are, you would see them do a lot better than me at maintaining this perfect angle all the way through the corner. It would be absolutely perfect at all times. That's what the goal is. Now, let's switch back to my cockpit, and even though there's no wiggling around in the chase view and it looks like it's perfectly smooth except for that one big correction, I'm making an awful lot of wheel movements here, right? 3 and 4 as well. All right. I could explain why I'm doing all those wigglings, especially on the exit of the corner, but I think it's better if I just demonstrate something. All right, so getting up to speed here. I'm gonna do that wiggling thing again, like we did with the front tires, but I'm gonna exaggerate it. So let's go through 1 and 2 in a second. Get up to speed. All right. You can drive like this, and if you don't talk and drive, for the most part, you can hang on a very consistent slip angle through the corner. I'm gonna reset and do it again, because I didn't accomplish it that time. But what's going on here is, again, I'm using that force feedback kind of to find kind of an average force feedback, trying to hang around that perfect steering angle. And I'm just wiggling my wheel back and forth just to explain that it's not really about holding a perfectly steady wheel angle to hold a perfectly steady angle of the rear tires. What's more important is reacting correctly to any perturbations in your slide. So going through the corner again. See, I can drive like this, and it looks like the car barely steps out. And I'll watch it from the chase view in a minute as well. I can drive like this. I'm not even losing any time really. I'm still only a tenth down on my faster lap I did earlier. Let's try lap 2. This is just proof we're on the rear tire limit, not the fronts. So as long as I keep that angle sideways, I can drive the same speed almost. I'm only a tenth down and I'm driving kind of ridiculous, right? So that's why I'm wiggling the wheel around so much. You know, not to that extent, obviously, but the wheel wiggles are just meant for me to feel the force feedback, give my, same as what I was talking about with the front tire limit. I'm trying to feel the rear tire limit with that force feedback like we were talking about a little bit. More visual's a little bit more important. I'm trying to understand how sideways my car is, if I'm getting more sideways or if I'm getting less sideways. But let's watch that. Again, this is what it looked like. It's like I'm doing 90-degree sawing of the wheel. But if we watch the chase view, it's going to be hardly perceptible. I'm just kind of maintaining the same, like look at the side of my door. It's the same angle for the most part. Maybe not perfectly smooth, and that's why I'm a tenth slower. It's because I'm making little mistakes. But for the most part, you can hardly tell I'm doing that stupid stuff with my steering wheel, right? So going back to my faster lap, and when I actually did implement some of that wheel wiggling, it was the late exit of the corner. Because right here, I'm accelerating, and the banking's going away, and I'm coming up the track. All of this stuff makes me wonder, are my rear tires gripping? So what I do is I wiggle the wheel around a little bit to make sure I understand whether my rear tires are gripped up or not. If I feel my rear tires start to get a little bit broken free, I'll do a little bit more of a correction like that. I'm probing my rear tires, trying to probe the limits. Because if I just hold my wheel perfectly steady, like I'm going to try this time, and I promise you guys, I'm going to try absolutely the hardest I can. I'm just going to hold the wheel nice and steady, no wiggling, and I'm going to go as fast as I can here, and I'm going to try to hit a 3. I'll try to get within a tenth of what I did. I'll show you how difficult it is. So really steady. Oh. Didn't feel that. There it goes again. See, I literally can't feel anything. And this is me telling you that, like, I'm gonna just go through the corner. Okay, it stepped sideways and jeez. Okay, yeah. You have to do these ridiculously big corrections. I have no confidence. I can't carry any semblance of speed through the corner because I don't feel the rear tire limit. I've got to make these little wheel movements um, to pay attention to how sideways my car is. All right, one more thing from that run before I let you guys do a few laps, if you'd like. Looks like we have five minutes left in the class, but I don't mind going a little over time here. The corrections. So is anyone kind of not confident in their correct, like, do you think you could have made this save? That one right there? Does anyone drive like this already? Or do you guys make your
Probably not.
saves a little different? I know Zach, we've been talking about this a bit. But what that save was I get a little bit behind. I didn't quite feel that my rear tires were getting a little bit too sideways. But the moment I realized, I said, I need to do a correction. Okay, so right here, my brain says, I need to correct the car. And what most people do, or I should say, um, more newer drivers will just gradually turn the wheel to the right and then wait for the car to correct and then gradually turn the wheel back left. And especially in this car or with a very loose setup like this one, that's not going to work. You can't correct it in time. So what I do instead, instead of turning into the slide and then waiting for the slide to end and then turning back left, what I do is I do this whole move and I kind of preemptively do the move. Like from this point on, none of this is a reaction. This is just something I kind of already had in mind. I already knew I was going to do it from this point. So this correction, right, left, I already planned it. And this is like a little building block for how to make saves. You always want to have this move. You're turning left, and then you want to turn to the right, and then you bring it right back left again to right to the same point you had it before. And what that does is it takes you from 5 or 6 degrees sideways to 4 degrees sideways. That's what your goal should be. You want to be able to do a right left, and you want to have these all like figured out because I do little ones. Like here's a little one, or that's a big one, and that's a little one. There's a bit bigger one here. Let's look at 3 and 4. Look for another slide. Oh, there's one. So I got a little bit too sideways there. So instead of being, 4.5 degrees sideways, I wanted to be 3.5 degrees sideways. So I just did a little right left right there. And it's all the same move. It's all just a little bit bigger one, like a big right left if I'm really sideways, or a little right left if I'm only a little bit sideways. Maybe I don't correct it enough. So instead of doing it once, I might do it twice. 1, 2, and then I do it again. I just do it a few more times until it straightens my car out. So that way you don't have to react perfectly. You just have to chain together 1, 2, or 3 of those little corrections. Anyway, that was probably more for next class, I think. We'll build on that a little bit more. But does anyone have any questions about any of that stuff? I'll allow you guys to do some laps if you want, and I can kind of critique you. But just fair warning, this setup's very, very loose. But also open to any questions. Get out there, Justin. Beat my lap like you always do.
I have so
Well, I don't know if I'm gonna beat your lap in this setup.
So I was going to ask you, with feeling the front and the rears, with the setup that's more so tight, I always feel like I can feel the front tires on entry and then the rear tires on exit, and that's kind of how I try to maximize it. Is that flawed? Are you looking kind of like for that balance, both, front and rear tire maximization on both entry and exit? And, if so, how are you feeling that with a tight setup?
Yeah, no, that's really good. So there he goes. um, with a more balanced setup, you're almost always going to run into that situation where you're normally a little bit on the tight entry side and a little bit loose exit. That's very normal because typically as the car load builds up and as you go into the banking, that usually tightens the car up for whatever reason. It's probably a really complicated reason. And then as the banking goes away, the car kind of unloads. Normally you get looser. Also, kind of add on the fact that on the entry, you're braking, you're asking your front tires to do most of the braking because normally your brake bias is quite a bit forward. And on exit, you're asking your rear tires to accelerate. So, on the entry, you're going to be tight because your front tires have another job to do. And on the exit, you're going to be loose because your rear tires have another job to do. So, yep, that's very normal, and it's a good way to maximize that. But you'll notice that, especially for a loose setup and certain tracks as well, when I drive a loose car on the entry, I'm kind of feeling for that rear tire limit a little bit too on the entry.
Okay. And
somewhere that's jumping out to me is Richmond. I'm on the rear tire limit at Richmond on entry.
And so when you say that the angle of the rear tires is the same as the angle of the car, like the same pitch, it's because when you turn the wheel, you're not actually turning the rear wheels, right? You're turning the front wheel. And that's why you're not going to have any sort of variance from what the slip angle or the pitch of the tire versus the pitch of the car.
Yeah, exactly. The rear tires are in the same direction as the car's direction. Yep.
That makes sense.
Except for, there's a little bit of rear steer going on in certain vehicles, and sometimes you have static toe, so it'll change and maybe even dynamic toe. It might change the slip angle slightly, but that's just nitpicking at details. It's a very valid simplification that whatever your yaw angle is also your slip angle. Yeah, of the rear tires.
Got it.
Okay, I got the league race I got to go hit on, so I will see you, Wednesday?
Yep, next one's Wednesday. Appreciate it, Charlie. Have a good race. Good luck.
I'm going to try to, thank you. It's helped me a lot so far, so we'll go from there.
Awesome. Good luck. All right. Anyone manage to complete a lap?
Barely.
I barely got one lap.
Obviously, this is way, way harder. It's way harder to do this and to do it fast because you can't turn the rear wheels, like Zach said. You can't turn them. So the only way to adjust how sideways you are is to literally change the pitch of the car by counter steering or turning. And that's a lot harder to do than just to simply turn the wheel a little bit more or a little bit less to fine tune your front tires. You need to make a way bigger and a way faster wheel movement for that. Did you do a 23.2 with this one, Zach?
I haven't completed a lap yet, I don't think.
Oh, okay, that was with the other setup.
Yeah,
Okay,
I'm
I was
struggling really
worried
bad.
there. I was like, how the heck? All right, so we're gonna finish up here, guys. I'll let you have the session. You got 50 minutes in here if you really want to work at this and try to get down in the twos. But I just wanted to show you guys. Let's pick on Justin's lap, I think, or who did the best lap so far. I might do Paul. Paul did a 4.
All right.
Yeah, that's a good lap. All right, let's look at your 47. All right.
Yep.
So just on the stream here, if anyone wants to join in. So this is what I'm looking for. I'm going to look for, if you're using the rear tires efficiently, it should look like the rear of your car stays the same angle all the way through the corner. Any deviation from that, if you straighten the car up or if you excessively get sideways, that's going to look like a mistake to me. So that's what I want you to look for in your own driving as well, not just with super loose cars like this, but any car. Whenever you see the rear of the car changing its angle, it's pretty much a guarantee that you're not using the rear tires consistently. So let's have a look. Go into the corner. And of course, at all times, we're keeping in mind to follow a smooth line through the corner too. Looks all right so far. Oh, that's a bit excessive there. A little mistake there on the exit, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Wiggling
Coming
around
off
some
is so
more.
hard.
Yeah, for sure. And then 3 and 4 here. So you get a little bit sideways on the entry. You straighten it up there. You see that? That's a big mistake. I know it doesn't look very big, but you lost a lot of time because you got a little bit sideways. Like right there, that's where you want to be. But you straightened it up right here. And then you went up the track because you came off the tire limit. And then this was pretty nice center off. A little excessive right there probably, but that all looked really nice. I liked your exit of 4. That was overall good. But just to play this in full speed here, your entry to 3, on the limit, and then off the limit, and then back on it. I know it looks really subtle, but that costs a lot of time because you pretty much went from 4 degrees of slip angle down to like 2 degrees of slip angle. But I'm just eyeing it. It's probably not exactly that, but if you look at that slip angle graph that we were looking at earlier, you're only producing half of the amount of grip when you straighten the car out, right? So just to back it up one more time, right there, you're producing maximum grip in the rear tires, but you get a little bit sketched out. You overcorrected, straighten the car out right there, and you're only producing like half the amount of rear grip right now.
So when that happens, usually it's because I'm a little scared to move the wheel back to where it was
Yeah.
because usually it makes it over rotate again. Is there any way to feel like how much you should come back, or is that just a lot of practice?
So what I do is it's always that little left-right move, or excuse me, the right-left move. And I have a feeling you made a bit of a lazy one here. So let's have a look. So you go into the corner, you get a little bit sideways, and then you did a lazy correction. Yep, saw it right there. So you turned in and then you made a little correction, but you held it there for a while and then you turned back left when you realized you lost your angle, right?
Okay, so it's just not quick enough,
Yep.
basically.
So when you're going into the corner, your correction was too long. You waited for you waited to feel your rear tires grip back up and stop sliding before you corrected back left. But if you watch one of my laps, let's look at my entry to 3. You're gonna notice my corrections. I'm gonna have them, but they're a lot faster. So here, I'll try to find one. Yeah, there's one right there, for example. So going to the corner and then right, left. So yeah, I'm not waiting for it to straighten out. I just know that if I do a little correction, it will straighten out as much as I want it to. So that's the difference. I'm not reacting to how much I've straightened the car out. I'm predicting how much it's going to straighten the car out after I make that little right, left.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
So if you want to practice that, you can use this setup if you want, but just allow the car to get a little bit loose and just make a little right, left. Feel the car straighten out. You don't want to straighten the car out completely. You just want to bring it back to that slip angle peak. That's what you're going for. Anyway, we'll build on this on the next class though. That's a lot more about. You got to use some throttle and brake technique as well to be more consistent on the tire limits. So, all right, guys. Any quick questions before we finish up?
Yeah. So when you do change, like your steering pinion, if you ever do change it during a session, do you also change your force feedback, like the I don't know what it is, it's the strength setting as well, with the ratio or the pinion change,
Yep.
so that max force.
Yeah. So, for example, if I go from the 236 up to the 315, I would do, well, the equation would be you want 2.36 divided by 3.15 amount of force. So, whatever that is, like 70%, I would want 70% of the force if I moved up to the 315.
Okay.
Yeah. Or you can just target the exact same F bar, uh, you know,
Sure.
up here. Yeah.
I guess another question then too.
Sure.
Do you ever mess with like the steering offset? And I guess this is maybe more for fixed setup racing, but maybe you can apply it to open setups as well. Do you ever mess with the steering offset? And if so, like, what are you usually looking for?
Yeah, the only reason I mess with steering offset is if I'm just like uncomfortable turning the wheel that much. Like I know how much to turn the wheel. Like I can feel the tire limit, and I know you're building up to that feel too pretty well. But if it's simply uncomfortable for me to turn the wheel that much or that little, I just change my ratio or opinion, or I change the offset. For example, this week in the Coke Series, my teammates are all running 0 offset. I don't like turning the wheel that much. It feels like my shoulders hunched over, so I just went to +4 instead of 0. It's just a preference thing. It doesn't help me with speed at all. It's just like comfort.
Okay.
But if you want a crutch, like if you realize if you want a quick fix to turning the wheel too much, you can try less like negative offset or a higher ratio. But I definitely recommend to tackle the root problem for anyone thinking about that. So, all right, have a good night, everybody. Thank you. Talk to you guys on Wednesday.
Thank you.
Thanks, Keegan.
Yep. Thank you.
All right, night.